So welcome all of you. Today is the 164th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda, both according to his Tithi, and because it happens to be a Saturday, we could do it on the exact day. So in India also, most of all our centers of the Ramakrishna mission are celebrating, and also within a few days, that is on 12th January, many youths, young children, and young people in different institutions will be celebrating the National Youth Day, because Swami Vivekananda was born on 12th January 1863. So, naturally, in India, when the children and the youths mainly look upon Swami Vivekananda for inspiration, he is looked upon more as a prophet who preached nationalism, or a Yogacharya whose idea was to rouse the sleeping Indian nation who was under the domination of a colonial power. And freedom was the goal of many of the young, if not all, young people in his lifetime, as well as succeeding his Mahasamadhi. There was a sort of conflagration, and all the youth, especially the youth of Bengal and other states, looked upon Vivekananda as an inspiration for Indian freedom, political freedom. But it would be wrong to just limit his role as a leader who inspired Indian national freedom, because that was a byproduct of his universal message, which was for the entire world. In fact, in his own words, he said this. We'll have to study the implications of this sentence of his. He declared once, I have a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. So now this is a tremendous statement. That would imply, to some people at least, in the West, that he came mainly to deliver a message to the West, just as Buddha had a message. These are his own words. Now, what are the implications of this particular message? Did he not have any message other than inspiring people to get rid of slavery, become a proud, independent nation? And apart from political freedom, some others would term him as a leader who inspired socio-economic progress, because along with political freedom, we also needed socio-economic progress. Otherwise, political freedom would not mean anything. So, to begin with, at least from the material point of view, many of the scholars, many of the academicians in India, especially the younger generation, both of his age or much later, they looked upon him as one who would inspire the young Indians who had got their political freedom to work for the betterment of the nation, especially the socio-economic sector, so that we can raise. And he gave so many talks. He inspired the younger generation when he delivered his talks, especially the talks on lectures from Colombo to Almora, which was recorded very faithfully by Goodwin, who was his English disciple, without whom we would not have perhaps got all these wonderful lectures. His letters would have been there. The new 4-volume edition is very inspiring. So through letters, many of his Indian disciples got a lot of inspiration. but they form maybe 30 to 40% of the total letters he wrote. A vast majority of the letters he wrote to his Western disciples. So that is of particular importance in trying to find out what was his message for the West, as he said, as Buddha had a message for the East. So Buddhism spread in the eastern part of the world, the so-called eastern part. Now it's a global world, but still we say this is the East and this is the West. We still have that distinction. But in a global sense, it really doesn't matter much nowadays because East and West have mingled together like never before. So you see Western values more sought after in India and the East, and Eastern values perhaps not as much but sought after in the West. So some kind of balancing is going on. And Swami Vivekananda, we can safely say, was one of the pioneers who inspired a global world order, a universal world order, where East and West would just be two words. He never wanted, for convenience, of course, he used the word. What is predominantly an Eastern idea and what is predominantly a Western idea, because that was the case in those days, but not so anymore. So we have to relook or try to reanalyze what his message is right now for Indians as well as for the so-called people of the West who are living in an increasingly globalized world. So that is very important. We have to keep reviewing or trying to understand his message, a message that he delivered so many more than 130 years ago, and try to find out its contemporary relevance. One is his life, his wonderful life, though short, just 39 years, 6 months to be precise, and his teachings or his words, his letters, which form what is now the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, which is a vast literature. Thanks to some of the very sincere disciples from England, like Goodwin, and some others like Miss Ellen Waldo, who noted down the Raj Yoga, and others. So many newspaper reports, unknown stenographers who took down his notes because he was not very particular or professional, and there was no recording system in those days. Though gramophone and other things were just introduced, but they were not so popular. In fact, even the Parliament of Religions, the whole proceedings of that, though it is available in a volume, was taken down in shorthand. There was no recording. But it was taken down faithfully, accurately, and later on published. So also some of his talks before the arrival of Goodwin, who is a very interesting character, who comes into Swamiji's life almost by accident and who lives for a very short time. He dies at the age of 29, unfortunately, in India, after having recorded most of his talks in America, then in England, and wherever Swamiji went. He just followed him like a shadow. So today, whatever works we have, whatever literature, apart from the letters, which were obviously written by Swamiji and they were preserved, most of the material, the important material or the first-hand material, which we can say because he recorded, he was a wonderful stenographer and he had a speed of more than 200 words per minute. He could record any, even if Swamiji gave a very fluent and uh, fluent speech, which was mostly not being recorded earlier, Goodwin could do it. The first reason being that maybe initially he faltered, but when he started living with Swami Vivekananda, he worked He was employed, in fact. Just for a few months, he took a salary, but later on decided to dedicate his life as a novice, as a brahmachari, always traveling with the Swami Vivekananda, not only recording his speeches, but publishing them, helping him to publish it in newspapers, all the other media which was available at that time, and also sometimes help him in washing his clothes and doing all sorts of tasks as a uh, carer would do, as a sevak would do. So he was a very important person. Though he lived for a very, because that shows that it's not the life, the span of life that matters. If in the 4 or 5 or 6 years, Goodwin's life is very interesting. I would like to begin with that because without that, we would not be sitting here. We would not be having all the materials that we read. Thousands and millions of people who are reading this, reading his complete works, they would simply not exist. Just think of it. And a young person, a vagabond like person who lost all his money given to gambling and in his whatever little he had earned while he was traveling in a ship from England to Australia, and then from Australia whatever he earned when he was traveling to United States, he was just like a vagabond. He had a wonderful talent, but could not save any money, mainly because of his gambling and drinking and other things. But somehow this helplessness, destiny brought him to Vivekananda. In New York, he found an advertisement because his Western disciples, who played a big role in Swami Vivekananda's life, that's why I'm coming to this idea of he had a message to the West. Who were the people who received that message? And who were the people who saved it for posterity? Because that's the only meaning we can understand with our limited intelligence. The implications of Swami Vivekananda's message to the West, it's just 150 years or 130 years now. And he said his message will continue to inspire people for more than 1500 years. So this is just a beginning. We do not know how it will spread and who are the other lucky Western people who will be taking on his mantle. But definitely the people of in those days, those who belong to the Western world had a very, very important role to play. Goodwin is just one example I am giving you. Because without him, as I said, there would be no complete works, no Jnana Yoga lectures which he delivered here. Maybe you would get a few newspaper reports taken down by some amateur steno or some reporter who would publish it in the newspaper as a small article or a small newspaper report, which would be of no use to most of us. The accurate recording that the stenographer who was initially employed, as I said, they put an advertisement, and in New York, because he had lost all his money, which he had earned in Australia, he ran away from England. He ran away from home under very difficult circumstances, and he decided to make his own future. So this young man uh, thought that he would be more successful if he tried in America. And in America, I was searching for a job. Fortunately, he read the newspaper advertisement and took up a job, but that was only for a few months. When he came in contact with the Swami Vivekananda, he felt that if this man can dedicate his whole life for humanity, the least I can do is to serve him. These are his own words. When he was asked why he did not want to continue in that salaried post, because he was desperately in need of money to earn a living. But there was something definitely in Swami Vivekananda's personality that inspired him to just give up everything, in spite of the background from which he came. Not that he was spiritual. In fact, jokingly, sometimes Swami Vivekananda used to make fun in England. He used to say You should have been named Badwin. Unfortunately, your name is Goodwin. So, because he was such a person, though he was very honest, very faithful, very devoted, and a wonderful transformation came in his life. It reminds us of Girish Chandra Ghosh, who came to Sri Ramakrishna, and his life was transformed in a similar way. So, Swami Vivekananda, he was one of the disciples, English disciples, who was very important in his life, especially in preserving the message which Swami Vivekananda said he had a message for the West as Buddha had a message for the East. Now, let us not discuss or try to understand what was Buddha's message to the East. That will be another topic. But what was Swami Vivekananda's message to the West, maybe to begin with, but to the entire world, especially India, which is getting increasingly westernized? Every year I visit India, I find it more and more so called westernized, in the sense they still have to get over that feeling. They need not get over that feeling because that is what Swamiji wanted. That to be Western is to be modern. When you say modern age, obviously every common man will say it is the scientific and technological age with business prosperity in business and creation of wealth. That is modern age for most of us, or most of the people of the world, East or West. So now, when he says, I have a message for the West, he definitely has a message for that includes India, which is no longer representing the best elements of East. Though Swami Vivekananda's patriotism was based on the values of the East as he found it. That is why Sister Nivedita, if you see the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, uh, to which she has written a wonderful introduction, speaks of the wonderful life and message of her master. She used to call him the master, and she wrote a wonderful biography. Sister Nivedita is another English woman who contributed a lot. We'll come to that, but she wrote an introduction because she was asked by Swami Sarvasthananda and other direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna to write an introduction. They thought she was the fittest person. And she writes in Swami Vivekananda's life and message, so there were three important forces that shaped Vivekananda, and such a wonderful analysis she has given. It's a brief article. We read the complete works, but we have to read its introduction. It was written when the first edition of complete works, which was just 4 volumes, later on it was increased to 5, 6, 7, 8. Presently it is 9, and soon the 10th volume, there'll be a revised edition with 10 volumes within a year or so. So, as new materials come to light, some unpublished material, and the master, as I saw him, is also a wonderful biography she wrote, because none of the other disciples of Vivekananda uh, had the courage to write his life. They said, we have understood very little of this great prophet. So, Nivedita took upon herself the task of writing his biography. But she said, the master, as I saw him, she was very particular because she knew what I see in my master may be my view or my understanding or reading of his life. It need not necessarily be the true picture. That's why she refused to write give the title a biography or something like that. She said, the master as I saw him. So that element of that idea that it is her idea, the way she saw the master, which is just a partial view. So we have to refer or depend on so many biographies. There's another one which has been popularly named as The Life of Swami Vivekananda in 2 volumes, by his Eastern and Western disciples. That was published much later than this master as I saw him, and that includes the work, or many people have worked. Swami Virajananji was a monastic disciple, Frank Alexander, Sister Nivedita. So a lot of Eastern and Western disciples have mm, come together to write as faithful a biography as they could. But in the complete works, the introduction, somebody had to write an introduction. There she says, three things shaped my master's life and message. First was his love for his guru, Sri Ramakrishna. So without Sri Ramakrishna, we cannot even try to understand Swami Vivekananda. His guru, then second comes the Shastras, the eternal Shastras of India, and the motherland. Three factors have combined in his the life and message of Swami Vivekananda is made up of these three predominant things. One is his life and message and the blessings that he received from his guru, that is Sri Ramakrishna. Then the Shastras. By Shastras, she doesn't specifically refer to any particular Shastra like Gita, Upanishads. It is mainly the eternal Vedas that is meant here. Because all other scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita and everything that has come afterwards is historically is known as Smritis. So when you say Shastra, you refer to Shruti, which is the Vedas. And there is a belief in all the Hindu traditions that when you say Shastras, it means the Vedas, especially the Upanishads. Based on those eternal values, so many Smritis were written. That includes all the Puranas, the Mahabharata, Itihasas. There are so many huge amount of literature, including Bhagavad Gita, because that is part of Mahabharata. So all those things come under a category known as Smritis. Smritis means based on the Shruti, but put in a different way so that people can understand it properly. So when she says Shastras, obviously she means the Vedas, and to a lesser extent, the Smritis also, Bhagavad Gita and all other books. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, there is a huge amount of spiritual literature available. So that was the shaping factor. But the Shastras without his guru or without having understood, Swami Vivekananda having understood the Shastras in the light of the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna uh, is not valid. That is what Swami Vivekananda himself says when he writes. He wrote very little about his own guru, master. My master, he gave two talks, and there is a small booklet he wrote on Hinduism and Sri Ramakrishna. There he writes that it is impossible for anyone to understand the Shastras, that is the Vedas, in proper light unless you read it in the light of the life and teachings of my masters, Sri Ramakrishna, and the light that he shed upon them. So, young Narendra, when he went to Sri Ramakrishna in his formative days, had read the Shastras, not that he was not aware of the Shastras. And finding that there were other scriptures belonging to other religions, he was attracted by that because his father was very keen that he was exposed to other literature, Persian literature, Sufi literature, and there used to be scholars coming there and arguing. So he was trained as a very liberal person, well versed not only in our Shastras, but also interested in our Shastras, but other traditions of India as well as the Western philosophers, because that was the subject that was taught in his Scottish Church College. In fact, he was introduced to Sri Ramakrishna by a Westerner, by his principal who was there for principal of Scottish Church College, who took a few classes in the absence of the English teacher, and who first introduced him to Sri Ramakrishna when he was explaining a poetry of Wordsworth. He said, if you want to see this trance which is referred to in Wordsworth's poem, you have to go to Dakshineshwar and there is a Paramahamsa, then you will get an idea of what trance is. So a Western teacher or professor who belonged to Scotland, Edinburgh, and who was in a temporary posting, introduces him. So the role of the West in introducing Swami Vivekananda, not only to his master, but the entire his understanding of the Shastras, as Nivedita says. And then the third influence, he says, motherland. Now, this is a very important thing to understand. By motherland, we mean because we are born in a particular nation, we consider it to be our motherland. That's a geographical idea of our motherland. In fact, Swami Vivekananda's definition of motherland was totally different. In fact, he says patriotism is an evil thing. I was shocked when I first read it. What he meant was patriotism, where because you are born in a particular geographical location, you hate every other country, you try to exploit them, you try to attack them, you try to conquer them. That kind of patriotism Swamiji never encouraged. That's the reason there were so many world wars, and there are wars even today. That is because when you call yourself a patriotic, nowadays they use a better word, nationalist. I'm a nationalist. So if you see all over the world, in the name of patriotism, you hate a neighbor of yours, maybe he's few hundred miles away. There may be other reasons. There may be economic reasons, there may be political reasons, there may be racial reasons. That apart, if you see, that was not the kind of motherland which Swami Vivekananda spoke of. When he said, I love India, it meant a totally different thing than what a person would mean if he says, I love India. So, as I said, I refer to this so very often because recently there was a seminar in London, Senate Hall, where globalizing Indian thought was being discussed. That now everybody is proud because of the great progress that we have made in the socio-economic sphere and wealth generation. Everything is, the conditions are improving. Swamiji wanted that. It's not that he didn't want. But that's not the India that Swami Vivekananda said has contributed to the entire world. That is a very important point to understand. If that definition is taken, then as one of the speakers in the seminar where somebody was asked, how are we slowly globalizing Indian ideas all over the world? Indian thought is being globalized. Some of them singled out Bollywood and this IPL cricket. So that is a very sad state of affairs. We are not great because of these two things. These are the least important things, though it may mean a lot for young people who have a fad for all these things. But anyway, the idea is that if Indians feel that these are the greatest contributions of India, IPL because it generates money, and Bollywood because it is popular among the youth, I don't think it's a very good idea of what our motherland is. Swami Vivekananda would not definitely, if he was alive, he would have shocked to death. He would have said, my God, did I preach this? Did I give this idea of India to our Indians? I'm not speaking of others. They can misunderstand us because they know very little of our culture. You can't expect to know everything about Greece as a person who is born in Greece understands his own culture and country. That is not possible unless you go and live there. But a person who is born in India, brought up in Indian values, and still doesn't know what India stands for, what his motherland stands for, then it is a pathetic state of affairs. Very pathetic. So, Swami Vivekananda's, when three factors, one is Guru, then his Shastras, again not in a narrow sense, not because they are our scriptures. Vedas, in fact, belong to the entire humanity. They were the most liberal utterances. That is why other smritis are very popular, because you can become sectarian. The great universal teachings of the prophets, whether it is Buddha, Christ, or the universal teachings, which can be termed as Shastras or the Shrutis, they are full of universal ideas. When it comes down to Smritis, when somebody tries to interpret the Bible, somebody tries to interpret other scriptures, and somebody tries to interpret the Vedas, then it gets diluted. And then sectarianism comes, whether Gita is superior or Tantra is superior, Chandi is superior. Then you fight over mother worship, this type of worship, that type of worship. That is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna, according to Swami Vivekananda, came to settle. He said, if you go on eternally quarreling amongst yourselves, he says, Swami Vivekananda says in his wonderful biography of Sri Ramakrishna, very small booklet, he says, India had become a veritable inferno. Everywhere there was this fighting, fires burning, people killing each other because they belong to a particular sect, not touching others. Out, people were being in the name of caste, creed, and color, and particular faith, particular sectarian faith, they were quarreling with each other. And for a moment, to the modern youth like Vivekananda, who had the benefit of, or maybe who had studied under the modern system of thought where religion was not given so much of importance. Science and religion, fortunately in Europe, made living more rational, because they found that wherever, this is true not only of India but all other countries, there are more wars fought in the name of religion, not by religious people. Truly spiritual people will not fight, but in the name of religion, because there was so much of eh, animosity between races, killings, and all. Younger people who wanted a better life, thought science and technology and all these rational ideas in the age of Reformation, they were very much necessary. And many of the old modes of worship were being discarded by the younger generation, both in the West and in India. Following their example, many of the Brahmos, they criticized idol worship. They even criticized Sri Ramakrishna's Kali Puja and many other worship. Idol worship was criticized, and everybody was trying to give advice how a rational approach only will solve the problem. Not understanding that the core of Shastras, they are absolutely universal, absolutely rational, and they present a way of life which, if followed, if we understand the true import as Sri Ramakrishna understood of the Shastras, they will create a wonderful atmosphere for living a complete, balanced, and a sane life. Materialism or science and technology by itself, it may help, but by itself it will not solve the problem. Otherwise, because science and technology have been misused rather than used for destroying humanity, not just for making our life better through medical and other. Positive side has helped, but the negative side is equally dangerous, equally destructive. Just as a narrow view of religion used to create wars, a narrow use or a limited use or a negative use of science and technology can cause the same amount or more harm. So that is why Swami Vivekananda, when he says, I have a message for the West, what he meant was the Western world, which has thrown off the shackles in those days when he came here. People had discarded organized religion, or maybe a religion which was based on narrow faith, fundamentalism, as it is uh, termed nowadays. Fundamentalism was being destroyed because people wanted a better life. And they thought that science and technology is something which is available to all. irrespective of the country you belong, it crosses all borders. It is not my science or your science. Science is science. So they thought here is a wonderful approach to life, and this alone would solve all the problems. All the wars of the past will be things of the past. All these crusades and the wars in the name of religion will stop when people unite in the name of science and religion. So a scientist, whether he is in belongs to this country or that country, ideally he shares all the ideas, and as a result, his life becomes more peaceful. That is what it was supposed to do. But unfortunately, the human nature doesn't change, whether he follows. If you see the negative side of religion and the negative side of all modern knowledge, if a person by the human being himself is negative, then no religion or no science and technology can change him. So the basic idea that the Shastras or the ideas which Swami Vivekananda understood from the life of his master Sri Ramakrishna was to bring about a transformation in man. So when he was asked, "What is your mission?" Sister Nivedita asked him. He said, "My mission is to bring divinity to every human being, not just Indians, to every man, every human being in this world, and to show how this divinity can be manifested in every moment of life, not just when he goes to the church or to the mosque or to the temple." His the search for divinity or the search for the ultimate reality in our Shastras, which inspired the rishis of those days, and also inspired his master to show the way how to understand these Shastras in the light of his own life and teachings, he found would save not only the West but also the East, who would be whom he knew the exchange of ideas would take place. People will run after whatever is good, and he wanted that. He, in fact, encouraged his own brother to come and study science here. In fact, some of the girls of Gaurima's school, Swami Vivekananda said, I told Gaurima, you send her uh, to England. I'll pray for their education. I want the girls to come here. But of course, society was so traditional that the girls, first of all, were not allowed to even go to school in India. So sending them abroad, he wanted the best of Western education to be given not only to boys. Boys were somehow coming in small numbers to study in some of the English universities and also other countries. But he wanted this exchange of ideas to take place even in those days. Now it is very common. Now we don't need, there are people rushing to the West and uh, trying to get the best of Western education. But at that time, it was a new thing, a novel thing, and people laughed at him. They even made fun of him. And girls, it was almost impossible. That was one reason he said, my master came to revive. That is one of his main ideas he puts in this small booklet. He said, why did he accept Bhairavi Brahmani as his guru in Sri Ramakrishna's life? No, none of the disciples pointed this out. Why was a woman who became a guru, who taught all the Vaishnava tantras and the other tantras and made him as a teacher, she came. He accepted it deliberately as a historical necessity to put a woman in a position which she was not used to. Forget spiritual authority. She was not even given political or socio-economic status in society, especially in the East, in India and other countries. So he wanted them to have good education first, secular education, science, technology, and all. But at the same time, he said, when they grow up, they should grow up with the values which are unique to India, and that is why he loved the motherland. And that is why when Sister Nivedita tried her Western methods to educate the girls, he did not allow her for 2 years. She is another great contributor, Western disciple of Swamiji, who wanted to help. She said, "It's very easy. I've already experimented in Wimbledon teaching girls." So she thought it would be very easy. Went to India. Then, when she found the society so narrow and people not allowing their girls to go to the school, she found the task very challenging. And to add to that, Swami Vivekananda said, "You yourself need training. You just can't come from the West and give some ideas to these girls and just uproot whatever little uh, culture they have. You have to first learn about Indian culture, about the vitality of Indian race, the motherland as he used to call. She became a great patriot, not because she never belonged to India. She was not born in India, but she loved India the way Swamiji would have loved, as a repository of Shastras, of eternal values, which would vanish if India died. So that's why Swamiji says, "Who lives if India dies?" So that was the motherland, not the geographical location of India, which we call India now. So it was for these values, it was for these Shastras, it was for these Shastras, especially understood in the light of his Guru's teachings. He told Nivedita, before you begin even attempting to teach the young girls, you first get educated yourself. So 2 years, which was she was getting impatient. She left everything in England and went to teach the girls. And Swamiji says, no, you need training first. So she had to learn Sanskrit, she had to learn the Shastras, and Swamiji helped her to do that. Some Swamis were asked to teach her. And not only that, she was asked to learn everything about Indian customs, not just say their superstitions. See what you can learn from that. And that's why we have 2 or 3 wonderful books she wrote, mainly for the Western audience: Cradle Tales of Hinduism, Footfalls of Indian History. That shows how, in 2 years, this lady who had no idea of what India was practically grasped the important elements which even Indians could not do. She became more Indian in that sense, though she always owed her allegiance to England. But she said, others used to say of her, that she knew more about India than Indians themselves. So that was Swamiji's contribution. He had a message for the West to tell them on their face that you have to imbibe, you have to understand the eternal India. And if you have to do it, you have to go there as a learner. Understand, don't see the negative side. He was very much upset because when he went to America, all the superstitions that were being practiced in the name of religion in India were published in book form, in cartoons, that people are throwing female babies to the crocodiles and all those things. And these volumes were becoming popular because people thought India is an aboriginal place. This idea he had to struggle in the West. That was his message to the West, as Buddha had a message to the East. He had to struggle to convince the people that this is not the India the Westerners have projected. They have just seen the superficial India. Just as we cannot judge a country, England or any other country in the West, by just superficially living and observing some of the citizens. We can't get an idea of how this nation was built. You have to understand the forces that shaped the different nations of Europe, of England, of America. So also he expected Nivedita to understand, if she really wanted to serve the motherland, she has to know motherland means his. When Nivedita refers to motherland, she used to uh, consider her guru's motherland to be her motherland, though not in the political sense, never in a political sense. So she was very keen that the the vitality of the Indian race, which she understood very fast, very quickly, thanks to Swamiji's training, the training that was arranged for her. So she could understand what Swami Vivekananda's message was to the West. To know that message, she had to herself imbibe the best, not the negative side of India, but the positive side, all the good ideas which she learned from her master. She, in fact, traveled all over the country. She went up to Amarnath. So on the way, she noted down whatever wonderful things. So it was a continuous learning process for her before she could even start educating the girls. Unfortunately, she died young, like Goodwin. Otherwise, they would have done wonderful work. Goodwin died even when Swamiji was alive, at the age of 29, as I said. He did his work, and Swamiji felt that perhaps Sri Ramakrishna does not want me to speak anymore. So he said, my last public utterance is over. He himself was about to enter into Mahasamadhi. He said, this much is enough for the next 1500 years. So we have to understand what is that message? What are the implications today? What were the implications in those days? It may not be the same. So till 47, maybe one of the main inspirations that people, especially the younger people, got was to how to get political freedom. After that, now they are getting inspiration in the name of Vivekananda. If you go now on 12th January, National Youth Day, so many children will be speaking, giving speeches that India has to become an economic superpower. That is what Swamiji said. And all those things they will say because they feel one purpose or one of the aspects of getting political freedom is now, since it has been achieved, now let us achieve the next one. But we do not stop there. If we stop, it would be wrong. So Indians, like the Westerners, have to understand that when Swamiji spoke of India, he was speaking of the Shastras of the way his Guru understood. If economics and socio-economic development was the only thing, then Sri Ramakrishna would have preached that. But if you see his life, he says, I know nothing but God, God and God alone. God alone is real, whatever else. Because he held on to that principle, because the rishis held on to that principle, no matter how much economically, politically we were subjugated, he said India still lives. So the India that lives, the India that Swami Vivekananda understood, as no other person, as Josephine MacLeod, who was one of another Western disciple, who in fact had the courage to say, she died at the age of 91, that Swami Vivekananda came to the West for me, to make me free. Though Swamiji complimented her by saying all other disciples had to struggle to get mukti, but this lady, who was Josephine MacLeod, whom he met for the first time, two sisters in Ridley Manor in New York, near New York. Of course, he was taking classes in New York when these two ladies came. And Joe says, Josephine MacLeod, who spent the last 30 years traveling all over the world, spreading the only mission after she met Swamiji, she says, was to spread this message to the West. Because she had heard, she says, when I first heard, the first word that came out of Swamiji's mouth was truth. The second word, the second sentence, the first sentence, second sentence, and everything that he spoke for me seemed to be nothing but truth. So she had absolute faith, like perhaps none of his own disciples, the monastic disciples, had. Because she says that, and she proved it by working for nearly 60 years or 50 years after she met Swamiji, trying to translate his teachings. There was nothing in her life other than Swami Vivekananda's teachings, which she felt can alone save the world. In fact, if you read, there is a beautiful biography of hers, written by her sister's daughter, Betty Leggett's daughter. She says, Auntie was very boring because day and night, if you speak about Vivekananda, you want to make some fun. They wanted to have parties and all those things. So in the book, she says she was, I mean, like they thought she was crazy. Yes, she was crazy, but for Vivekananda, because anybody who came, even the Earl of Buckinghamshire and the Earl of Sandwich, who were married to their family, even in those royal circles, she would not hesitate. Something which nobody would dare to do. In such a gathering, also, she would carry a book of Vivekananda and tell them, if you want to, if you want to lead a normal, balanced life, and if you want to save yourself, you have to read this. So she was so full of Swamiji's message, and Swamiji complimented her by saying all other disciples had to work for freedom. Jo was free even before she came to me. So she had very little to do. She had almost realized the goal of her life. Just imagine a Western woman coming to Vivekananda, and Swamiji sees that here is a woman who doesn't have to work for mukti. Whereas we have to get rid, she had absolutely no attachments to anyone. If you see the wonderful life, there are two biographies of hers, fortunately, one by Linda Prug and another by Pravrajika Prabuddha Prana. If you see this glorious life, then we understand a little idea we get what was Swami Vivekananda's message to the West. In fact, Roma Rolla, who wrote the famous Nobel laureate, who wrote the first well-known biography of Swami Vivekananda. Of course, Max Muller wrote a short biography of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, was because of her. She gave, though he was a French writer, she got all the English books, paid his sister, who said, I'll charge you for everything, because she had to translate that into French. And based on that, those materials, he wrote a biography which has become a wonderful biography. He got Nobel Prize for something else. He wrote a life of Mahatma Gandhi also. But the two biographies was because of Jo. So also Spanish, German, she spent money from her own pocket. She used to carry money. Said, if you want to translate and publish, I'll pay. I'll pay for the translation, I'll pay for the publication of Swamiji's works, whatever was available at that time. So you see, she saw the importance. Because as she herself said, every word that he spoke was truth. Others might have doubted. Even his own Gurubai sometimes thought, what is Swamiji speaking of when he says he has a message for the West? That is why when Swami Vivekananda, few days before his death, Premanandji saw him, and Swami Vivekananda was coming down from the old temple. He just made a remark, and Premanandji was shocked. He said, if there was another Vivekananda, only he would have understood what this Vivekananda has done. So we are far from knowing or even trying to understand with our limited knowledge, with our limited bias, prejudices, and other things, what exactly he came for. Why did he spend so much time in the West, cooking his own food, living in the dark hole, being cheated by sturdy? Why did he struggle? Will it all go in vain? If we are to believe some of the Western disciples, especially Jo, none of the actions that he did, every minute he said, every word that he uttered after that, and she was dying to listen to that. Everything, she just followed. She went to India, purchased, built a house for herself, which is known as Leggett House, and there's another house. And even after Swamiji's passing away, which was a big shock to her, she used to visit every year, 6 months almost she spent in India, trying to see if she can help Nivedita, trying to see whatever money she had. She inherited a lot of money. Obviously, she and her sister were very rich, Betty Leggett. So, and whether it was America, so many of the American centers, the American work would not have would not be successful without her contribution. So this is just one example. I'm giving you. There were others like the Savior couple who sold their property. Just one request from Swamiji, they went and started the wonderful ashram at Mayavati. You have to see to believe how one lady who lost her husband within a few years of reaching Mayavati refused to leave that place, infested with jungle, with the tigers, a jungle and without water, absolutely cold, and she lived there for 30 years building the dream ashram or dream center of Vivekananda, where he said, my Eastern and Western disciples will stay together. Of course, that dream has not fully been fulfilled. Not many Westerners go there. They go to India, they visit so many places because there's so much of uh, attraction in other places and other sightseeing and other things. But for serious people, Mayavati was a center which was started by Swamiji's English disciples. There was no way ashram could be started. They didn't have even money to build the Belur Mutt. And Henrietta Muller gave money for the land, and then later on, one Helen Rubel from Switzerland, who was in Boston at that time, gave a big chunk of money for completing the Belur Mutt temple. So these disciples who have tried to do their bit, though it doesn't appear to be phenomenal in that sense by way of expansion, but they made a beginning in those days when everybody was struggling. Swami Vivekananda, the world leader, was struggling to get a little money for starting the establishing the mission. So at that time, these disciples, without thinking, batting an eyelid, they just sold their property, took such a big risk, living in that forest. Husband has passed away. This lady says, "No, have to fulfill the mission that dream project of yours." Maybe in future, the Western disciples and Eastern disciples will live there, holding on to universal values without any formal worship. That was his idea. That at some level, when you practice spirituality, all the considerations like patriotism, your caste, your nationalism, everything has to vanish. Then you will be following Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings, for whom God was the only reality. Neither India nor West nor anything of this world, however beautiful it had absolutely no meaning. Because if spirit is the only truth, as Jesus said, my kingdom is kingdom of the spirit. Unfortunately, the Romans did not understand that, and they thought he wanted to become the king of this material world. Otherwise, why would he allow himself to be crucified? Because the world that they desire has nothing to do with Bethlehem or India or their birthplace, Kamarpukur. Absolutely. When he said, if I wanted, I can cover the whole Kamarpukur with gold. But I know it's not going to help. Nothing is going to change. It will be a golden Kamarpukur. Just as we have these huge temples now, plated with gold. He didn't come to preach that. Neither did Jesus, neither did Buddha. If you see their messages, they spoke of the kingdom of the spirit, the eternal values, which are the Shastras. And Swamiji's patriotism was because our Shastras predominantly, not that other Shastras did not say that. Bible says it. All the other great teachings of the world prophets, they say the same thing. But the essence of Shastras, the Guru and the motherland as Swami Vivekananda saw it, which he wanted desperately. It was not because of uh, economic or social prosperity that he wanted India to live, though it will come as a byproduct. But his main idea was if India dies, all these spiritual values which she has cherished No matter who came and ruled her, the Mughals came, the British came, and even before that, kings came, they fought with each other. But the common spiritual person there who understood spirituality, he held on to his spiritual values. The rishis, the people who inspired the Shastras, that is Vedas. And that was the India that Swami Vivekananda called his motherland. Nivedita, of course, understood, though she was a Westerner, but I doubt if Indians even understand a little bit of the patriotism when they refer that Swamiji is a patriot prophet. Now, if you go, you will find. Then they will say this because of the inspiration of Vivekananda, we could do so well in Bollywood and IPL. They may even say that. He inspired us. Everybody will say he inspired us to become great, maybe an economic superpower. But Swamiji's ideas, if you want to really understand, it has to be understood in the spiritual sense. That he came neither for the East nor for the West, though he said his message was predominantly for the West, because he believed that they have already acquired enough wealth, enough prosperity, and they are now in a position to take up something higher. Whereas perhaps he found that the East had to still catch up with the West as far as economic prosperity is concerned. Then they will understand the value of spirituality. Though he said India was never in need of prophets and they used to come with regular. He praised India for that. In spite of the poverty, in spite of the foreign rule, the Mughal rule, the English rule, India continued to have a creative minority of people who always held on to these spiritual values, whether it is the Marathi saints, the Gujarati saints, the UP saints of UP, Surdas, Tulsidas. India constantly produced these people who did not bother who was ruling them. Swamiji says they didn't bother whether Akbar was ruling them or anybody. They were like Sri Ramakrishna. He didn't bother whether the Queen was ruling, whether India was independent. Nobody could stop him from worshipping his God the way he wanted and doing all the experiments, and everything fell into place. People came, helped him, Mathur Babu came, helped him, and he could safely say, or with authority say, that I know nothing but God. Because he understood his motherland, that is India, Swami Vivekananda could learn the lessons. Then he understood that this is the true greatness. Then his master had to show where the truth of the Shastras lay. And that was a guiding light for his life and mission. In fact, going to the West was not his idea. And I'll conclude with this. When he was in Chennai, he was trying to find out what is he wanted to know the real essence of the motherland. So first he did not go to the West. He just had a long tour of India, begging, not mixing with his Guru Bhais. And when he was in Chennai, when he was in the Marina Beach, Sri Ramakrishna is pointing to him to go to the West. So he thought it was a hallucination. He said, what shall I do? I have no goal, I have no plans. Then he writes to Holy Mother because he knew that if I really have to go to the West, for what I don't know, but if I have to go to the West, let me confirm. So when Holy Mother says, no, it is Thakur's wish that you go, lot of things you will accomplish. So he immediately decides to go without any plan. As he said, he goes without a letter of introduction, just goes there, struggles in the initial stages, till he is, by Thakur's grace, by Sri Ramakrishna's grace, he is helped in the Parliament of Religions and after that. And also during his subsequent visits to England, in Europe, and other countries. He says, Sri Ramakrishna's grace was always with me, and he made me do his work. And it was his mission that he accomplished. So that is how we can try to understand. We have to read between the lines, we have to read most of his books, not just superficially. There are people who like some quotes and then they go applying those quotes, it's good. They help them in their studies, they help them in their careers. Nothing wrong with that. Swamiji wanted to everyone to take what he can. But at the same time, people who are really serious, they have to go a bit deeper and try to think or try to analyze. Did Swamiji just come to give us some kind of self confidence so that we can have a wonderful career and we do well in our jobs? Is that the goal of life? At least not according to Swamiji, not according to Sri Ramakrishna. Those things may come in one's life, and there's nothing, because some people, if especially in India, all this career making books and all, you'll find full of quotes, and people get a lot of inspiration. I'm not denying that. Instead of becoming negative, it's better to have that kind of limited idea and let people be strong. Let people be strong by reading his words. But at the same time, if we go deeper and try to understand him as Josephine MacLeod understood, so we have to, when he said he had a message for the West, he meant such people, these few people, they are few. We don't know how many others were inspired because he stayed for almost 8 years, 7 years to be precise, in the West. So naturally, he would not spend his time. His life itself was 39 years, 40 years old. So out of that, one fourth he has spent in the West. So definitely he had a message for the West. We have to try to understand it. And for that, we have to try to read whatever is possible, whatever we can understand of these great personalities in the West who try to understand his message and maybe in a limited way apply in their own lives. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Paramastu.